have a question. Is one truly great, groundbreaking song enough to call the album that it's on a classic album? The song in question is 8 Miles High, and it is remarkable. The rest of the album, with one exception, I think it's a collection of junk. My co-host feels otherwise. Take a listen, and what do you think? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Classic Rock Album Olympics with your co-hosts, Robert Rodriguez and Gary Wenstrup. We are excited to dig into the Byrds album, their third album, Fifth Dimension, and we will select the 3 songs that we think stand up the best to us all these years later. Because of rights reasons, we cannot play any of the songs in the podcast, but in the show notes, you will find links to all the songs so you can hear them there. And with that note, we will go ahead and get started. So let's see a little bit of backstory, Robert. And how are you today, Robert?
I'm great. And the first thing that pops into my head, just as a random question that I don't know the answer to, is okay, so we know this album was released in 1966. What I'm curious about is the vocal group, the Fifth Dimension. Did they exist already? They must have, right?
I
Because
think so.
Beautiful Balloon was a hit in 67. So they must have. I'm just wondering who had the name first.
Yeah, that's interesting. The Beautiful Balloon that all of us know is Up, Up, and Away.
Yeah, right. And it's a Jimmy Webb song, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know which came first. I wonder if there was ever confusion about that.
Because we know just in everyday life, everybody's familiar with the 3 dimensions that we encounter on a regular basis. And then the Twilight Zone, which premiered in 1959, there is a 4th dimension. So this is one step beyond the Twilight Zone, one step beyond. See what I did there?
Very nice. So we'll probably get to that in some of our conversations on this album. So going back to the beginning, 1964, Roger McGuinn, whose name at the time was Jim McGuinn, it changes to Roger. We're going to stick with Roger for the sake of this podcast. Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark meet. They are both folkies. And around that, not shortly thereafter, David Crosby joins, who is a folkie as well. They see the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night, and it inspires them to mix their folk, which they all 3 are seeped in, with Beatlesque pop-up. Somehow, they get their hands on an acetate of Dylan's unreleased Mr. Tambourine Man. They work up a pop arrangement. They actually have doubts about it, but Dylan listened to it prior to it being recorded and was encouraging. And it's at this time that Michael Clark joined and Chris Hillman joined the band. Chris bass, Michael Clark drums, and they joined the band. And the song, Mr. Tambourine Man, released April 1965. It goes to number 1, and folk rock is born. The album goes to number 6. They followed up later that year with another number 1 song, Turn, 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 Bible verses set to music by Pete Seeger. That album goes to number 17. And that takes us to the third album, Fifth Dimension, which was released in July of 1966. That goes to number 24 on the charts. Other albums that are popular at the time, Revolver, Pet Sounds, Aftermath, Blonde on Blonde, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Time. That's pretty good. Pretty good lineup. Other songs popular at the time, and this is interesting to me, it's even those are wonderful albums, it's still kind of a singles market. Painted Black, When a Man Loves a Woman, Hanky Panky, Wild Thing, Red Rubber Ball, Sunny, Summer in the City, Paperback Writer.
Okay.
And we'll probably reflect a little bit about that as we get deeper in the conversation. So this is the third Byrds album. They'll release 12 altogether. The other things that I'll mention is that things have changed since albums 1 and 2. Gene Clark participates in writing and adding vocals to 8 Miles High, but then leaves the band, so he's not present on the rest of the album. And
that's a song that actually originates in late '65, and so it predates the album and the sessions, but it was out as a single in early 66. I believe by that time he had left the band.
Right, exactly. And what makes this sort of a turning point, not only does he leave, but he's been the principal songwriter on their first two albums. And they've also done a lot of Dylan covers on the first two albums. So the change here is Gene Clark is only represented with this co-write, 8 Miles High. No Dylan songs are recorded here. This is the first album they play their own instruments. They had been using the Wrecking Crew prior to this, and they have a new producer. It had been Terry Melcher. It's now CBS sort of West Coast producer Alan Stanton. And the only other thing I'll mention is this is sort of a lot of a lot of turns with the Byrds, in that this is the turning point where we get folk rock. And excuse me, the Byrds are the turning point with Mr. Tambourine Man when we get folk rock. And then they will become the turning point with this album with psychedelic rock with the song 8 Miles High. And my last sort of connection to this album is with psychedelic rock and 8 Miles High in particular. They take rock music to a new dimension. Whether it's the fifth dimension, I can't say, but it's certainly a new dimension. Robert, your thoughts?
So it's an interesting choice for us to land on in the Byrds' career because the first two albums, I would say, are roughly interchangeable, not a
Mhm.
lot of forward movement. As you'd said, they saw Hard Day's Night. And the thing that becomes their distinguishing characteristic right out of the gate is the Rickenbacker 12-string guitar that they see George Harrison playing in that movie. And it should be noted that when they started out, there was an iteration of them, Crosby, McGuinn, and Clark as the Beefeaters. You're trying to get a British sounding, British evoking name for themselves. Beefeaters being those guards outside the palace in Britain. Um, they're writing together, record a bunch of demos. They're all pretty much straight up folk. There's no electric backing on them at that point. But the one song most people know is the one that got covered by the Turtles, became one of their last big hits, You Showed Me. It originated with that early iteration of the Byrds before they went electric 12 string in the form that we know them today. As you said, adding Hillman, who was a bluesgrass musician, and Michael Clark, who essentially was brought into the band. He was a novice on drums, but he looked like Brian Jones, and that was good enough. So they brought him in. So first two albums are kind of interchangeable, but now the third one is where, as you'd indicated, and perhaps with the loss of Gene Clark, they have to really step it up as writers. But music is changing too. 1966, you'd mentioned Revolver, a huge leap forward for the Beatles. Things are getting more psychedelic, more experimental, Eastern sounds creeping in. And we get into our full discussion of 8 Miles High. We could talk about that. But the Byrds are there along the way. And it's a natural fit for them because we know anecdotally, David Crosby was a huge fan of Ravi Shankar. And in fact, had witnessed his recording sessions at Pacific Studios in LA that were happening on the West Coast. So come the famed meeting between the Byrds and the Beatles in August of 65 in Beverly Hills, it was Crosby that was really pushing Robbie on George Harrison, who of course then ran with it. He already had his interest in sitar going back to the filming of Help earlier that year. So this whole sort of raga rock thing, really between the Beatles and the Byrds for sure, but you can also point to the Yardbirds who tried putting a sitar on an album or a single earlier that year with Heart Full of Soul. Didn't quite work out. The Kinks were using Eastern drones on some of their material that year. So all these threads, all these new directions in rock are coming into play. So this album 5D, I would say in the Byrds' career, is definitely, as you said, a turn. It's this definite transition from pure folk rock to what would blossom in their next release, Younger Than Yesterday, which is a bit more developed. So you could see this is the turning point. They're kind of dealing with the loss of Gene Clark. What do we do? Well, this album is sort of a looking backwards and looking forwards for them.
I think that is accurate and a great addition to the sort of the setup for this album.
While
So
sidestepping Dylan, which is a big thing
yeah,
because he got them into the game with Tambourine Man, but it was a well that McGuinn would want to return to over and over again that really chafed Crosby, who saw it as a step backwards and would ultimately be one of the factors leading to him departing in 67.
yeah. So why don't we jump in, because I know we're going to have a lot of conversation about a couple songs in particular.
Mhm.
So why don't I start? Why don't you start with your bronze, Robert?
All right, fair enough. My bronze for this one is John Riley, which is a traditional folk song. And it's something that I'd never heard the song before, though my dad was a big folkie, and we had a lot of 60s folk in the house when I was a kid that he picked up and was part of my environment. I mean, acts that are not household names now or stuff that I grew up on. And this was a song that I didn't really know. What's funny is that other artists would pick up some of this stuff, and when my kids were little, one of the things that we indulged them with was the Wiggles. I don't know if you're familiar with them, this
Sure.
Australian kids
Yeah.
entertainment outfit who made magnificent music, but they
Hmm.
picked up on old folky songs from this era. And I think they're probably of that age that they would work into their stuff, like the Whistling Gypsy Rover and I can't remember what else, but songs that I would investigate is like, oh my God, that was recorded originally in the 60s by this artist, that artist. So John Riley sort of fits into that category. I don't know how far back it goes or who might have been an originator of it, the same way Dylan did a version of House of the Rising Sun that then became turned into the Animals mega hit and later Frigid Pink. It's one of these things that people have that they pick up on and transform into something else. So the Byrds treatment of John Riley is pretty straight up folk rock that could have fit on one of their first two albums for sure. But when you've got that vocal blend that they had between Crosby and McGuinn and Hillman, it's such a great sound, and add the 12 string to it, and it's just something that I could listen to endlessly. John Riley has the benefit of not being an overly familiar track. It's not Dylan, it's not song that got played a ton on the radio. I don't think I ever heard it on the radio. It's something that I just discovered. In fact, I think the first time I heard it was on a compilation. It might have been that Byrds box set that came out at some point, and then I backtracked to this 5D album. It's like, oh, there it is. It's a good track. So I didn't know at the time really where it fitted chronologically, but it's something that I thought was as fine an example of any of them doing a traditional folk song, birdsing it up, and it's just a pleasing record. It tells a story
Yeah.
like a lot of folk songs do. I have no real commentary on that. It's
I
just
I would I would submit it's actually the best part of the song, that it does tell a pretty good story. Do you want to tell the story briefly, or do you want me to tell the
Go
story
ahead.
of the
You
song?
tell it. I've talked plenty already.
Yeah. Sure. So the setup is that there is a conversation between a man and, quote, a fair young maid. And the man asks the fair young maid to marry him. And she says, no, she can't. She's waiting for John Riley, who she hasn't seen in 7 years. He's gone off to sea, maybe to fight in a war. And the fellow that she's talking with says, well, he could have died. He could have drowned. So why don't you marry me? And she says, no, I must wait for him. And then he tells her, well, I am your John Riley. Again, they haven't seen each other in 7 years, so conceivably she doesn't recognize him anymore. And he sort of says, I'm going to reward you with your faithfulness, and you are now mine forever, or something to that effect. Does that sort of cover the story?
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing terribly profound, and you see
Yeah,
these
that's
sort
all
of
right.
yeah, it's all right. These sort of romantic things pop up time and again in these old folk songs. So, yeah, that's the payoff to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, you think it's funny you say 7 years. I'm thinking what the Beatles look like at 62 versus 69. So, if 1969 Tittenhurst John Lennon showed up on your doorstep when you're expecting 1962 John Lennon, I'd be a little taken aback too.
Good point. So that's your bronze. I must say it's not my cup of tea. I I struggle with this kind of traditional ballads that are being updated, and they have another one on this album, Wild Mountain Time, and I
Hmm.
don't care for that one either. Um, it reminds me, it's the sound of Fairport Convention, and I struggle with that sound.
Hmm.
Is what it's not the sound I struggle with because, to your point, the sound is good. It's
Hmm.
just I don't know the nature
Little
of the
goes a long way.
melodies. Yeah, a little goes a long way. The nature of the melodies get repetitive. I will say, in this case, I find the best facet of the song is the string arrangement.
Uh-huh.
It's not just a stock string arrangement. There's actually some nice, interesting touches in it that make this song more appealing to me.
I don't know off the top of my head. You'd mentioned the Columbia staff producer that was responsible for this, and it being a departure from Terry Melcher for the first two, and who they would use for the next album, who was Gary Usher. So
Mhm.
again, it's another transition thing. I wonder if he pulled in an arranger or if he did that himself. But the point being, they didn't work with him after this.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there was a specific issue for somebody that wanted more, or if it was just they took what they had at the time and moved on to where they were positioned to actually make a decision, have a choice, and have that be fulfilled. I don't really know the story there.
Yeah, they did not want him, Alan Stanton, to be their producer, but they had no choice. I guess if you were going to record for Columbia, you needed to use their staff producer.
Hmm.
And then, to your point, they did have a choice next time around, and they went with Gary Usher. To my ears, I think he did a great job in terms of production. It's clear, it's crisp. I give him credit. It's a nice job.
Yeah, I'm not at all critiquing it myself. I'm just wondering what was in their heads. Was it they just resented
Hmm.
it being not a choice, and the next time when they were positioned to make a choice, they got their choice? I don't know off the top of my head, and maybe you do, because 8 Miles High was recorded as a single before the album session started with Gene Clark on board. Was it with the same producer for that, or was that
Yes,
a different producer? It was him. So
yes,
that was
yeah.
that was
Uh,
maybe the first time that they worked with him.
yeah. And apparently, they had recorded an earlier version
Uh-huh.
that some claim are better than the version that we know. I
Have you
don't
heard it?
think so. Yeah, and it's available on Spotify and YouTube. I prefer the recording that we've grown up with all these
Yeah.
years. It's not bad. It's very similar. It's not bad or anything like that. I don't prefer
Right.
it. I think David Crosby prefers it, but he could just be a contrarian.
That would be on brand.
Yeah, right. So anyway, they did re-record it pretty much because they had to work with this producer and Columbia Records.
Good.
All right, why don't we move on to my bronze? And it is the title song, 5D or Fifth Dimension. It is Roger McGuinn as the writer. Um, and I guess the first bit is sort of, as you've mentioned, and we'll probably mention a couple of times, just a great, wonderful guitar sound that,
Mhm.
jangly guitar. It's made richer on this particular song because Van Dyke Parks, sort of famous LA session musician, and I don't know,
Songwriter.
collaborator extraordinaire, supplements it with keyboards, which just fattens the guitar sound a bit, which I like. I'm not particularly fond of the melody. To me, it feels like another traditional ballad. There's just kind of a sing-songy nature to the melody. It was the second single on from the album, but it only got to number 44. Um, the lyrics are fascinating. When I first listened to it, I assumed it was about an LSD trip. And I got to read some of the lines that took me there. I saw that the world crumbled and thought I was dead. I continued to drop through the hole. I'm kind of skipping through the song.
Yeah.
Just be quiet and feel all around you. I opened my heart to the whole universe and I found it was loving. I don't know. To me, that just sounds like another version of an LSD trip.
Very, very much so, for sure. While equal parts, it's funny because the Beatles were trafficking the same thing, a bit
Yeah.
Lewis Carroll.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, dropping through the hole. Absolutely.
Right.
And the whole sort of we are one kind of thing that you experience when you take LSD, so I've read. And Roger McGuinn was very disappointed to think that that was people's interpretation of it, because he says it wasn't that at all. He says he was trying to, I guess, put into song Einstein's theory of relativity, which
Yeah.
I will tell you right now is way over my head. But I do think it's interesting in that, as you alluded to earlier, we live in a 3D world with objects that have height and width and depth. And it's thought that the fourth dimension is time. And then in Roger McGuinn's way of thinking, there is a fifth dimension, something that humans know exists, but they can't necessarily experience it. Maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's not, but that's what he refers to as the fifth dimension. So looking at this song through that filter really adds a fascinating element to it. He's going deep with what he's trying to communicate in this song.
Well beyond the standards of the pop single, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a love song, obviously, although it mentions love. And it doesn't really have a narrative as such. It's a
No.
description. I always thought that this happens to be my goal, by the way.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
This was always a standout track for me.
Okay.
Even though it's not without its flaws, I love the groove. I love the mood of it. It is in waltz time, which is an odd thing. Something clearly Michael Clark struggled with, because you hear him lose the plot at some point on the drums. If you're
Hmm.
like a drum, yeah, I'm a drummer, so I pick up on these things. But you hear it happen. It's like, oops. But they kept it in it to me. It humanized it. To your point, the Van Dyke Parks organ, I love that element of it sonically.
Hmm.
It's a nice
Hmm.
touch, simple, but it's elegant, and it sort of fits the mood. Um, I never thought that hard about the words, other than like so much in folk, it sounds earnest. It sounds like he's singing something that means something to him.
Hmm.
There's the part after the bridge where he comes in with that high, oh, holding the
Yes.
note. That
Yes.
that to me, it always sort of gave me chills. It's a nice vocal moment for Roger McGuinn or
It's
Jim
a
McGuinn at that
gr-
time.
it's a great vocal moment. I'm so
Uh-huh.
glad you mentioned that. To me, I don't know that it's the highlight of the song, but I love that moment. And I'm sort of disappointed he doesn't repeat it.
Yeah.
Maybe at the end, or maybe in between a verse or something. You nailed it. That is a great moment in the song.
It's a really short song. It's just barely, what is it, like 2.5 minutes or something like that. That's a song that, if ever there was a good excuse to stretch out live, and I'm thinking of
Mm.
the Untitled album, which is like half live, and they've got these long ass versions of 8 Miles High and things like that. Um, it would have been a nice one to stretch out, because it's got such a wonderful groove to it, and space you can fill with either his 12-string explorations or something, because a little of that gets indulgent, as we both know, kind of a hallmark of some 60s artists, that there's a bit of self-indulgency that goes on. I would point to something like Mind Gardens on the next album, which I love, but it might not be disciplined and tight enough for some people's sensibilities. But this is one that I think is so good, you couldn't do wrong stretching it out a little bit.
Mm. Nice. So that is my bronze, and it happens to be your gold.
Has that ever
So
happened?
I don't think so. I don't think so. So it's a fifth dimension for us too, Robert.
Yes, there you go. That's it.
So why don't we go to my silver,
Huh?
which is the song "What's Happening,"
Mm.
which is David Crosby's first solo composition for the Byrds. And I have my initial. Well, first I got the guitar.
Uh-huh.
It's Roger McGuinn's 12 string. It's beautiful. It's sharp. It's clear. It's resonant. And there are interludes of it all throughout the song. And then I think what sort of pulls this into metal worthy for me, there's just kind of a nice chugging rhythm guitar going behind it. So I
Uh-huh.
think the combination of a nice rhythm guitar track along with Roger McGuinn's an elegant, fabulous, 12 string makes it metal worthy to me. When I first heard it, the lyrics to me are a complete trifle, um, just completely awful throwaway. It's just over 2 minutes long with a long fade out,
Mhm.
and the lyrics are basically 2 minutes of David Crosby singing "I don't know" with more indecision and uncertainty thrown in. And then we get to the very last line, and even though he's been "I don't knowing" for 2 minutes, he sort of sings, not sort of, he sings intending, but I'm not crying. I'm laughing mostly, which is an
Mhm.
awkward turn of a phrase. And to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, what an eye roll and how shallow. But then I thought, well, now wait a minute. Life is a series of one I don't know after another, right? That we just kind of go through life that way. So I guess maybe you could cry and be sad about that there's so much unknown. But then all we can do is sort of grin and work our way through it. So I still think it's really shallow, but I can overthink it to being something worthy.
I think he's capturing a mood, a
Mm.
confused mood, whether you want to attribute that to 60s drug use or adolescence or what. So he's got that going on. What I always found kind of interesting was that for such a smooth groove of a song, it's another mood piece, really, which is something that the Byrds, I think, were very excelling at that time between the use of the 12 string, between them trying to bring in these sort of Eastern sort of I don't want to say scales, but uh, that sort of floating, drony sort of sound. You know what I'm talking about? Which I think
Uh-huh.
this does have to it. And Crosby, stretching out the notes when he sings and things like that. I think he's just capturing a mood. The words are almost beside the point. But what I thought was funny and interesting was when you see it on the album, it's what's happening, question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation. You expect something a lot more dynamic and in your face and, just abrasive. That was what I expected. It's not that at all.
No, great observation. Right. The tune doesn't live up to the title. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the punctuation. And for me, it would have been ellipses, question mark.
Exactly. Any other thoughts you have about the song What's Happening?
It was one that was in contention for a medal for me because I do quite
Mhm.
like it. And
Mhm.
I find if I have to judge a song for a medal, so it's something I would commend, something that I would honor, something that I would draw attention to within a collection of a dozen odd songs or whatever. A lot of times, my primary focus is the overall sound. And I think just based on our conversations over the course of this podcast, a lot of times you will drill down to the lyrics, and if you don't like them, it will be a deal breaker for you.
Mm.
Whereas for me, if I like the overall sound, I'm not going to be too hard on the lyrics unless they're patently offensive or wrongheaded or something. To your point, they are kind of slight, not a lot going on here, but to me, it doesn't damage my overall perception of the song because I think the groove is so good and the way he sings it is so good that I can enjoy it and just detach from thinking too hard about, well, why did he work at this more? Why did he put in some effort that would elevate it to gold status? I'm not going to think about it that hard. I
Mm.
think that, we're sort of applying 21st century criteria or older man criteria to maybe the way I would have listened to it when I was 18 or something, you know?
Well, that's an interesting idea. Um, I guess I'm sort of thinking about, a college kid with this album. And I think we all looked for pretty deep meaning in pop rock music back in this era. Maybe this is a little before we looked too deeply, but next year, Sergeant Pepper, you start to get into, you look really deeply into what they're
And I'm not
saying and
disagreeing
what,
with you. By this time, there
yeah,
absolutely would have been plenty of that going on. That it was a door that Dylan kicked open, where people were
yeah,
like being conditioned to the lyrics got to mean something, man. They got to, in John Lennon's case, that was where he started to make the shift to it had to be about himself. He had to strive for authenticity.
right,
It
yeah,
had to, it couldn't just be garbage thrown out there. Although, he would then opine Dylan gets away with murder because he just throws out this nonsense stuff that people find deep meaning in. But to me, there's enough meaning in other songs on this album that not everything has to be a statement. And
yeah.
maybe Crosby would say, well, my statement is I was in a moment of confusion, and that's what the song is about, no more, no less.
Well stated. I totally agree that it's for me, it's music that grabs me first. And if the music is good, then I want to go deeper into the lyric.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm disappointed and sometimes I'm not. In this case, I'm disappointed, but to your point, it's the music that brought me into it. It's the music that made this a metal contender. So absolutely, point well taken. All right, so that is my silver. So Robert, why don't you share your silver?
My silver is the biggest song on this album, which is 8 Miles High, which we've mentioned in passing before, credited to Clark, McGuinn, and Crosby. It's, as people, I think, who are all sort of classic rock students know, 8 Miles High, the title meant to McGuinn, who came up with it, the the height of a passenger plane in flight, although it's actually, I guess, 6 miles high, but he thought 8 miles high scanned better and sounded better. But here we are in 1965, 1966. You put the word high in a song title, and people automatically conclude you are advocating drug use, which is why this record was not commercially as successful as it might have been. I think you might know off the top of your head, it top 10, right? Or at least
No,
top 15.
close, number 14.
Yeah, okay. I knew it was something like that where it's such a revered song by most rock fans that you would have thought it did better, but for the fact that a lot of radio stations wouldn't play it because of they thought it was advocating drug use. It had high in the title, so it didn't get the commercial coverage it should have gotten in 1966 when it was released. But with the benefit of hindsight, you can certainly appreciate the fact that here are these guys who've barely been a commercially successful band for a year at this point
No,
that are so stretching the paradigms. This is essentially an experimental recording crafted for top 40 radio. So kudos to them. And I would make the argument, in fact, I have in my Revolver book, that when you've got people like the Beatles paying attention and listening, showing, you know what, to go commercial, you needn't be restricted to the traditional pop form. You could bring other elements in and still come up with a worthy record for radio airplay, AM airplay. And so I think that that is something that really commends it as a act of artistic daring for sure. And specifically, what we're talking about is the Byrds, not only the aforementioned Robbie Shankar, that sort of raga modalities that they're applying to pop music, but also the improvisational John Coltrane stuff that they talked about that is evident here in the instrumental break of the song. It is a description of their trip to England to tour the UK. So that's what the imagery is, black limousines and you can go through it lyric by lyric. And if you know that this is about the Byrds traveling to England to go on tour, and it was not a particularly successful tour, it should be noted. It wasn't, this great, wonderful experience that they're commemorating here, such as a year later, well, in '67, when the Monkees went to the UK, Mickey Dolenz, in his first attempt at songwriting, would write Randy Scouse Git, talking about the reception they got in the arms of the Beatles or Kings of EMI, all that stuff. So it is possible to write a song about going to England if you're an American artist and turn it into something amazing. So anyway, there it is. Now you might be wondering, a song that I love as much as I do, why did I give it silver, not gold? I would say that this is something that I think is my critical adult mind being critical. I don't think McGuinn's solo is as impressive as it could be. It's like
Wow.
I,
Whoa.
I think that he's basically closing his eyes and let his fingers do what they will do. And in the hands of somebody maybe a little more skilled or a little more thoughtful, it could have been more profound. Instead, it sounds like, I'm going to give you this 12 string and come back in a week. Let me see what you can do with it. That's what it sounds like to me.
It I don't argue that point at all. I know it's seeped an important history with raga and jazz and John Coltrane, but I don't disagree with you. It's a dissonant sound that is just not appealing to me. Whether it's well played or not, I can't say. I just know that a lot of what he does here, I don't really need. His the guitar hook that he has in the song is, it's his typical shimmering, clear, resonant 12-string tone. When he goes into his jazz interludes, it doesn't excite me.
That I guess we're saying the same thing different
Yeah.
ways. Is that
Okay.
when at the end of '67, Dylan puts out John Wesley Harding, and Jimmy picks up on All Along the Watchtower, and then shows you the possibilities with that song so profoundly that Dylan's like, damn, this is how I'm going to do the song from now on. And that's exactly what happened. So that's why it's too bad that Jimmy didn't pick up on 8 Mile High, because I think
Mm,
that would have really blown people's minds to show the potential that lay there.
yeah. Um, a lot of people will say, in anything you read, this is the first psychedelic rock song. And I wanted to sort of search my memory bank to see whether that held up. And I'm curious what your thoughts will be. So this came out, I'm just looking at release dates.
Mhm.
It came out in March of 66.
Yeah.
And the other songs that I thought were contenders, the Beatles' Rain came out in May of 66. Paint It Black, to me, has psychedelic overtones. That also came out in May. Sunshine Superman came to mind, but that came out in July. And then my brain went to Love Forever Changes, and that was a complete 1967, so the next year. So I know it's always problematic to say to say the first of anything. It's usually
Yeah.
not. But I can't, I couldn't think of anything that predated it that felt as psychedelic. And what about you?
I researched this very thing one time because I was curious what the first, and because it doesn't count when it's something that might have been recorded but doesn't get heard by the public till much later. So
Yeah.
if you're really taking the time to research, well, when was it crafted versus when it was heard, I guess sometimes things make it to the public well after they were originally recorded. But to me, if we're trying to come up with a first, it should be when it was created, right? And
If memory serves, it was created maybe in December of
yeah,
65.
it was, yeah. So that definitely makes it a contender. But if it's not heard by the public till much later, then it doesn't really have any influence, right? It had
Yeah,
influence once
right.
it came out. That's
Well, unless, they're hanging with the Beatles, unless they're playing, each
right.
other's, acetates of each other's upcoming releases.
Yeah. So I remember when I did do the research one time, that one of the things I came up with was crafted, because I kept thinking to myself, who was also very experimental during this period and would later get lumped in or judged to be part of psychedelia. And I was thinking Yardbirds,
Yeah.
as well as Eastern. And it's funny how Eastern sounds and psychedelia are sort of
Mm,
intertwined,
yeah.
and it's not, I know that this pisses off every Indian musician to think of, that classic Indian music being associated with LSD use. That's
Yeah.
something they're very happy about. But so I was thinking, was there some Yardbirds recording that could be considered psychedelic that predates this? And my answer is probably a lot. Depending on, you've got like the droning sort of monk sound of "Still I'm Sad." Is that considered psychedelic? I don't know. But funnily enough, one of the things I landed on was something that came to public consciousness in '66. So it's within this era between Byrds and Beatles and all that stuff, but it had actually been recorded, I believe, in late '65. And that's probably the greatest Yardbirds impersonation of all time from a California garage band, the Count Five, Psychotic Reaction.
Oh, okay.
Now, does that
When
group
does that?
psychedelic to you? It's fuzz guitar. It's got that rave up, I'm a man style fast strumming on the muted strings,
Yeah.
harmonica. It gets typically lumped in with psychedelic garage sound. So that might be something. Um, the Seeds, certainly
Yeah.
Traffic and Psychedelia, 13th Floor Elevators. So
Yeah.
if I were to point to anything as being a first sort of psychedelic sounding thing, I think I'd gravitate toward these one-off garage band things, messing around with that stuff.
Okay. All right. Valid. Um, Psychotic reaction. Interesting. It almost does sound like garage psychedelia. If that's a
Yeah,
category,
right.
it would fit there. Um, but you do have to say about this song. By the way, this is my gold.
Okay.
What an incredible leap forward with this song. It's so innovative and experimental and adventurous.
Uh-huh.
You really got to take your hat off to them with this song. And I guess you also have to take your hat off maybe to Columbia Records, assuming it's their decision to release this as the first single, because it's got so much of a dissonant sound. And maybe there's not a lot of pop oriented songs on this album. But anyway, I think it's a really interesting first choice for a single if you're a record company, because it's so unusual and adventurous.
It has that built-in commentary on it with the flip side.
Tell me, oh, why, right?
Right. Why?
Wait,
Yes.
why?
So picking up the 45 and 8 miles high. Why? There it is. Why? Which
Well,
just as an aside, that's a song.
yeah,
It's a Crosby song. I think
yeah,
it might be co-written with McGuinn, but it's essentially a Crosby song. Um, that I think it's a great. This essentially, to my way of thinking, is a double A side single. Why is a
mm,
great track in the same sort of vein of this experimental, drony, borderline psychedelic, if you like, sound that they would then re-record for the following album, Younger Than Yesterday,
yeah.
in what is to my ears an inferior version. It almost sounds
Mm.
like a demo compared to the one you hear on the flip of 8 Miles High.
I can't tell you which I'm familiar with. I've listened to it. I know the song. Why? I'm not impressed by it, but I don't know which. I don't know which version I've heard. So maybe I need to go back and listen to the two different versions to make sure I'm hearing the best one or commenting on the best one.
The B side is much more of a groove
Okay.
altogether, and the other one is more sort of tentative sounding to my ears. But do you like Heat Wave by Martha and the Vandellas?
Sure.
It's sort of a psychedelic version of that, really, if you listen to it
Okay.
musically. Yeah.
That's not
Think
what I'm
about the
recalling. So
think about the
I
chord
must have.
sequence that uh, 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 it's right there.
Yeah.
It's fairly obvious.
Okay.
The Who did
Um,
it too. Anyways, so maybe that's their sort of foray into. I think there's some psychedelia happening here.
in Heat Wave, we have to go back to Heat Wave.
I think so.
The lyrics, as you said, they're alluding to their plane flight and relatively unsuccessful tour of Britain. Um,
Great
and not,
town, known for its sound.
yeah, exactly. No warmth.
No,
And the shapeless forms are their fans. Um, that said, it's funny that you brought up All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix, which is an incredible song and an incredible interpretation. And the lyrics of that and the way Jimmy sings it, there's so much foreboding. There's so much trouble on the horizon kind of thing. And when I listen to this song, I get that same feeling that I get from All Along the Watchtower. there's a certain discomfort. There's a certain foreboding in the lyrics that feels like trouble ahead. And I don't know that that was intentional, and it's perhaps a misinterpretation on my part, but I feel that in the song. Did you get that feeling of foreboding or discomfort or something off
Oh
a
yeah.
little bit? Oh, you do?
Well,
Okay.
you'd referred to dissonance before, which is
Yeah.
by design, but the song is literally describing a bad trip.
Yeah. 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 Um, the one thing that I haven't, neither of us have mentioned on this song is the vocals. The harmonies are awesome.
Mhm.
So you have all this interesting guitar work that's innovative and experimental, but what grounds it are the incredible harmonies.
Mhm.
I mean, the way this is sung is just beautiful.
Mhm. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that you expect no less from the Byrds. I mean, essentially, their vocal group plus 12-string guitar.
Yes. True. True.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
4 strong singers. And I have to say, I said something that can be considered disparaging about Michael Clark earlier and his drumming capabilities, but
Ah,
this is an outstanding performance from him for sure.
you're absolutely right. I was going to mention that. I'm so glad you brought that up. Neither Chris Hillman's bass or Michael Clark's drums, to my mind,
Mhm.
feature prominently on this album.
Mhm.
They're just kind of afterthoughts. They never call attention to themselves, with the exception of this song.
Yes.
There's that great bass rumble that starts off the song. Ooh,
Yes.
do
You
that
like
again. You do that pretty good.
that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got it.
Yeah.
And then the drumming as well is terrific. There's some great drum rolls that sort of kick into the chorus or the verse or something.
Yeah.
I'm
Played a
so
couple
glad
of
you mentioned
cymbals.
that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. The two great contributions from musicians who have not really paid attention to up until this point.
So years later, early 80s, was it circa 81, 82? Were you familiar with that record by the Plimsolls, A Million Miles Away?
I don't think so.
It was one that upon first hearing, I immediately thought of 8 Miles High. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't alone in that because it's built on a 12-string lick. And, otherwise the song has nothing to do with it, but it's very evocative of this. And I have to think I am not alone in picking up on that. And I have to figure Peter Case and those guys were fans of the Byrds, and like a lot of LA bands of the late 70s, early 80s are going back to 60s stuff that we revere. And that it might have been an inspiration point for sure.
Yeah.
I would put that
Um,
in the playlist for anybody listening to this show. Check out A Million Miles Away by the Plimsolls.
I'll make note of that. All right. So I think we've now covered the fifth dimension. So before we get to reviewing our gold, silver, and bronze,
Mhm.
stars 1 to 5, what do you give this?
Overall, I would give it a solid 4.
A solid 4.
Yeah.
And do you want to expand on that?
Oh, sure. Okay. So we haven't talked about some of the other tracks on here. You'd mentioned Wild Mountain Time, which I believe has been compiled because I think I heard that on Greatest Hits 1 or 2 at some point before I started going back and picking up the individual Byrds albums. And I like that. Okay. It's another traditional country, folk, bluegrass, whatever you want to term it, tune that they excel on, if you like that sort of thing. We talked about what's happening. Um, Hey Joe, again,
Hmm.
to go back to Hendrix. So
Yeah.
a lot of people did the song in the 60s. Love did it. Uh,
Yeah.
for my money, I mean, again, I know everybody loves the Hendrix version. It's decent enough, but my favorite is by the Leaves, which
Yeah.
I love the fast version. The one here, I think, is lousy.
I totally agree. I don't care for it. I don't like it. And actually, I disagree with you. Once I heard Jimmy's version, I'm done. I don't
Uh-huh.
need to hear another version. So actually, in preparing for this, I went back and listened to the Leaves version, and Love does a version. And once Hendrix gets to it, you can throw all those away. Honestly, I mean, the Hendrix is just, it's so dramatic and so good.
It is good. It's dramatic. I'm not taking anything away from it. I personally love the Leaves version. It's fun to play because I did play it in my band, and there's guys that have run out of F's to give. They're just all in on it. I love it. It's
Yeah.
so spirited. That's what I would say.
And the other problem with the Byrds version of Hey Joe is Crosby singing it.
Yeah.
And he's just got the wrong voice for it. It's sort of, a high, squeaky vocal. Apparently he championed it, and they were resistant to them recording it. And finally they relented, and it's a shame they did.
Yeah, it is a shame they did, considering that Crosby had other material floating around. There's stuff that would surface later on that perfectly worth the stuff that, would have gotten him a little extra revenue if they put the song he wrote in its place, but they didn't. The story I remember hearing or reading is that Love did it. I love Love to death, that band. I'm not very impressed with their Hey Joe, but a member of Love, Brian McLean, had worked as a roadie for the Byrds, and that was how that happened. Love did it first, and then the Byrds picked up on it that way, for what it's worth, which isn't a whole lot, as we both concluded. But one song, a very conspicuous song we haven't talked about that's on this album is Mr. Spaceman.
Yeah, it's not a medal winner for either of us. And it was, I think, the third single from the album. So the record company certainly thought it had potential. I don't know. To me, I think even when I heard it a million years ago, I just thought it was slight. It's cute. It's a novelty song.
It's a novelty song, yes. On another day, it might have gotten a medal from me. I don't hate on it at all, but
Yeah.
it's a piece of nothing, and but it's pleasant. It chugs along nice. I will say I quite like the solo at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. There's nothing.
The harmonies are nice on the
The
chorus.
harmonies are fine.
Uh-huh.
So you'll laugh at this. Me and I don't have a fixation on lyrics, but I do pay attention. So he's singing about an alien or a Martian,
Yeah.
why is he calling him Mr. Spaceman? I mean, and maybe I'm influenced by Harry Nilsson's song, but to me, Mr. Spaceman sounds like an astronaut. Well, he's not singing about an astronaut. He's singing about an extraterrestrial being. So maybe I have issues with it right from the title. It should be Mr. Martian or Mr. Alien or Mr. Extraterrestrial Being. I know
I
it may
guess
not
Mr.
rhyme.
Martian would have scanned exactly the same way, right?
Yeah.
Mr.
Yes.
Martian. Yeah. But I don't know. My favorite Martian was on TV at the time. Maybe didn't want that association. But
maybe. Yeah.
that would be a commercial tie-in that use it as the theme. But it's a pleasant enough record. I like it okay. It's just not exceptional for me. Now, McGuinn, who clearly, as we know, had this fixation with physics and science fiction and all that stuff, and the closing track, 242 Foxtrot, the Learjet song, I could tell already just by your look on your face, you're hating on it. I don't hate it.
Oh, for goodness sake. Why in the what in the world do you find redeeming about it? This I got to hear.
I'm not going to die on this hill. To me, it doesn't offend me. It's novel. Again, the same way Spaceman is novel. It's okay.
Oh,
I don't hate it, but it's not something that I see as like that they took a lot of effort with. One of these songs that takes longer to listen to than it did to write, evidently. But it's all right.
Oh, for goodness sakes. It's 2 minutes of pain. For those who haven't listened to it, the lyric is going to ride the Learjet baby over, like, listening to pilots preparing for takeoff. It is awful.
You got to be into that, I guess, to appreciate it, which probably few people were. But maybe that's the price of, we read all the time when we look at the history of the Byrds of the combativeness between McGuinn and Crosby. And here Crosby is flexing a lot. It's like, okay, I could easily see McGuinn putting it on the table to him. All right, if we're going to do your lousy version of Hey Joe, then you're going to indulge me on the closing track of the film. And that was the trade-off.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're the ones who have to listen to it.
Well, there you go. That's the price of self-indulgence.
That we pay.
Yes.
And we as listeners pay. So you give it 4 stars and I give it 2. And actually, the reason for that is it kind of what we were just doing. There's only 11 tracks on the album. 3 are traditionals. So we get to that Irish Scottish thing. We get Hey Joe, Hey Joe. So those are, to me, kind of weak points. I know one of them is your bronze, and so pardon me. We get the absolute throwaway, the Learjet song that we were just talking about, that I was whining and complaining about. And then we get an instrumental. You've got the Byrds with these incredible harmonies, and you get like a 2-minute instrumental. Yeah. So the reason I'm, giving it 2 stars, we've got 11 tracks on it, but only 6 are worthy of my time and attention. There's just too much junk here. Side 2, you open with 8 Miles High, an incredible song, and then the remaining 4 songs are just junk to me.
Well, I will tell you that the main reason I'm giving it 4 is because of the presence of 8 Miles High. If you didn't have that song on the album, you take that song off, replace it with any other Bird song, I could see plummeting at least to 3, possibly to 2. For the reason you're saying is that there's a lot of junk on there. But if I would have to stake a claim of why this album is not completely junk, I would point to John Riley, 8 Miles High, What's Happening, Mr. Spaceman, Wild Mountain Thyme, and 5D. So however many songs it is, those are all worthy songs to my ears.
Okay. That completely
alongside some Drek.
Yeah. All right. Admittedly. All right. So Robert, my bronze was Fifth Dimension. My silver was What's Happening. And my gold is 8 Miles High. What about you?
All right. My bronze, well, it's easier for me to go the other way. My gold was 5D. Mm-hmm. My silver was 8 Miles High. And my bronze was John Riley.
Yeah. A great conversation about some really special music that is on this album. So, Robert, thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Classic Rock Album Olympics. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend and become a subscriber. We welcome your feedback at classicrockalbumolympics.com. This is an Evergreen production.